Hey friends, it's Andy. Welcome to our new show, Accelerate Expresso. Look, I know you're busy, and it's hard to keep up with all 6 of the great episodes we publish each week. So, with this show, Accelerate Expresso, we're going to deliver highlights from each episode from the previous week. And in the process, give you short, delicious shots of insight from a show you might have missed, and to help amp you up for the coming week. Now, before we jump into it, please remember to visit iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen to subscribe to this podcast. And while you're there, leave a review, please, for Accelerate. We need your feedback to ensure that we keep delivering the high levels of value you expect. Okay, let's Expresso. First up on this edition of Expresso from episode 494, it's my friend Townsend Wardlaw. Townsend's a sales transformation architect and a very entertaining guest, and this is his second appearance on Accelerate. In our conversation, we talk about some really quick fixes for poor sales productivity that any organization can implement.
It's the number one challenge that I see for selling organizations, and it's getting worse, not better.
Productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I'm not even talking about efficiency. I'm talking about the raw output of basic activities, right? At the end of the day, selling is a function of a number of interconnected activities that have to start someplace. And when you go all the way to the top and you say, what's going on to drive top of the funnel activity? I don't care what it is. There's not enough. As I've shared before in this show, the things that I care about are obviously raw activity, but to me, the fundamental metric that any organization can use to assess its health is how many top of the funnel first scheduled conversations are reps or whatever you call them on a week, right? If that number is any less than 8, you're suboptimized, right? If you think about how a funnel plays out, how first conversations turn into discovery, turn into, whatever your process is, every organization can sustain a minimum of 8 and ideally even more like 10 or more top of the funnel first conversations. I'm talking a 20-minute, hey, saw you on our website or, whatever it is. In order to generate those conversations, you have to actually, perform activities, emails, cold calls, social selling, whatever your little flavor of the month is. But when I actually look at what the reps are doing, the answer is typically 1 or 2, right? So there's the one leg of the stool is, okay, so you're not on enough top of the funnel conversations. Then you say, okay, what's the root cause of that? And you go over and you look at the raw activity they're generating to try and, create those first meetings, and you'll see 20 dials. Right? 20 literal phone dials, possibly the same amount of emails. And you kind of step back and you go, what are these people doing all week? And I hate to slam reps and such, but the reality is when you look at the problem, it almost always relates to you're not doing enough stuff. I don't know what you're doing all week.
On Tuesday in episode 495, I spoke with Tim Wackel. Tim is also back on Accelerate for the second time. Good guests get invited back, as you probably notice. And as you'll see in our conversation, Tim delivers the goods with great advice about how you can create killer sales presentations.
My advice, Andy, has always been, and you hit the word, it's to rehearse. Oftentimes reps think that, forget reps. I'll speak in first person. Early on in my sales career, I'd be seat 21D on an American Airlines flight, and I got my laptop open, and I'm going through the deck. Mm-hmm. And that little voice inside my head, he is brilliant. It's like, oh, they're going to laugh at this. Oh, they're going to go wow at this. They're going to cry when I say that. So that little voice inside your head is usually a pretty doggone good presenter. The challenge is nobody else can hear that little voice inside your head. So there's a big difference between kind of, practicing in your mind and kind of thinking about it and actually physically rehearsing. So if it's a tabletop presentation, you rehearse in a tabletop environment. If it's a stand-up presentation in a boardroom setting, you try to get as close to the real deal as possible. If it's going to be, a group setting with 25, you want to try to rehearse in an environment that is going to be as similar as possible to the environment you're in. And that seems so fundamental, so basic, but oftentimes, again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We're running around so fast that we don't even think about doing that. And then we get in front of the customer and we launch and it's like, I don't know what to say. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm not even confident what's on the next slide.
Next up in episode 496, Harry Mills. Harry's the author of an interesting new sales book titled Zero Resistance, The Science and Secrets of Supercharging Your Sales by Eliminating Buyer Skepticism and Mistrust. Now, in this conversation, Harry and I talk about the central premise of his book, which is that the most effective way to get buyers to a decision is not through the traditional tell and sell sales model, but through buyer self-persuasion. You want to check this out, and then listen to the full episode on Accelerate.
Yeah, and I mean, even the thing, I mean, we've talked about consultative selling and relationship-generated selling, but basically all the research shows that people have become very cynical because they feel instead of a seller using an open-ended conversation to take them down to pursue a list of possibilities, what they're doing is they're seducing them and guiding them down a pretty well-guided path of discovery, and they say, and I've got that. And so that you've been led to their product. And so what sellers haven't realized, there are two ways basically of influencing someone. There is a way which is called direct persuasion, and even if it's packaged as consultative selling, it's essentially about using your reasons to influence the customer. Now, the environment's changed that the customer pushes back. And if there's any real friction or push in the relationship, it even becomes harder to deliver some form of provocative or new cutting-edge insult because you're getting resistance. But what they don't know, there's a much better way to sell, and it's been there for a long time, and it's been called self-persuasion. And self-persuasion is when people persuade themselves. But as a seller, what you do is you help them find their own reasons for wanting to buy. Now, what you're doing is when you help people find their own reasons for wanting to buy, there's no resistance. And the reason is very simple. We don't argue with our own reasons.
Sure. That's the principle of consistency that's been laid out several times by social psychologists and so on. Yeah, people have this inherent need to be consistent with their own beliefs.
What I wrote in 2000, I wrote a book, and I subsequently became the Harvard managed mentor on influence, and I did a lot on self-persuasion. And I expected the sales world to rush in and take up self-persuasion and incorporate it and transform all of their ways of selling, but they didn't. And about 3 years ago, I suddenly
before you go on, so why is that the case? Why do you think they haven't adopted it?
Well, that was a question that I asked, and then I realized there was no self-persuasion. All the research had been done on individual pieces of persuasion, whereas for 100 years, and more than 100 years now, direct persuasion has had a whole variety of processes which have been refined and processed. So anybody who goes to a sales course knows that you start with a sales process which starts with something like establish rapport, uncover needs, et cetera, through to close the sale.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody had actually developed a self-persuasion process. And so what I think was happening, people would think this is a good idea, but how do I implement it? How do I train people in? So that was the first thing. And the second thing was that nobody had actually developed a set of tools, no process, no tools. It was like CRM before the computer. It was like accounting before spreadsheets. Someone had to invent the spreadsheet to make it easier to put the numbers in. And so what I realized suddenly, if there was going to be someone who was going to put it together, because I've been working in the area for nearly 20 years, it had to be me. And so hence zero resistance. And so zero resistance is really just a set of tools and methods which allow you to use the old language to build an empathy bridge at the end and to close with a statement which gives the customer called it's your choice, closes the sale more successfully. And once people see the process and once they understand the process, and because they intuitively relate to it, because they hate being told what to do to themselves.
In episode 497, I spoke with Andy Fowler. Andy's the co-founder and CTO of Nutshell CRM. We had a great conversation about whether CRM systems are just command and control systems or whether they can really help the individual sales rep to build better relationships with buyers and help the buyers in their decision-making process. And at the end, we delve into the future of CRM, and Andy gives us thoughts on what future CRM systems will look like.
Great question. I think there's going to be a couple of angles. Base CRM's clearly staked out that they think the future of sales is in data science and AI and machine learning and all of that. And even Salesforce, they put a slightly friendlier face on it with Einstein. A lot of companies are kind of, I would say, drinking that Kool-Aid. That takes me back to my rant that, sales is still about building relationships, and that data can only take you so far. So what I would be looking for and be eager and more intimidated by when it comes to competition is products that really understand how to understand the relationships that you're building with your customers rather than the data about your customers. And I don't know that anyone has well figured that out yet. And actually, maybe the most interesting piece there was Microsoft's purchase of LinkedIn. And I don't think it's a perfect way to understand relationships, but it's certainly the platform where all of us are on and that knows about a lot of our relationships. So there's surely going to be more coming out of that.
On Frontline Friday this week, episode 498, Bridget, Gleason, and I talk about sales principles. Really core sales values and the necessity of having principles guide your sales methods versus the other way around. And we discuss some excellent books that describe the value of principles in sales and in business in general.
Well, I've had Jocko come to train several of my teams. So I brought him in at more than one place, and he's amazing. He's fantastic. I think Jocko is great. And we focus on the customer, but we also, there were a lot of techniques and so I guess I don't know that we've maybe, I don't know that I think it's as dire as I think you do. Maybe that's it. Like, I think that,
well, I don't think the world's going to end.
I don't think the world's. If the world ends, it's going to be for other reasons.
Yeah, it's not because it's not because sales doesn't have enough customer focus.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have other threats, but I do think
that are real.
But I do think that, and I'm not alone in this. That certain the sales models that are very popular these days are not sustainable and are going to have to evolve fairly substantially over the next 2 to 3 years. If companies are really going to say, how do we really address and help and support our customers? How do we become, as Amazon talks about, obsessed with the customer?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is figuring out how do we, in the changing landscape that we're in, with regards to how people buy and how they find information and seek information. How do we stay obsessed and focused on them? Or I don't know where to go find them. I don't know how to interact with them. I don't know how to, I think the two sort of go hand in hand. I think we're at a place where we're trying to figure out, okay, things are changing and the way that the customer wants us to interact with him or her is changing. And so how do I do that? Are there tools that will help me do that better in a way that the customer will find less offensive or to be more helpful?
Finally, episode 499 with Nancy Bleeke. She's president and chief sales officer of Sales Pro Insider. And Nancy's also back on Accelerate for the second time. And we had a great conversation about the sales behaviors that make it easier for buyers to engage with you, the seller. You want to check that out.
So for me, ditching the pitch means getting over wanting to tell people everything that you can do and not be able to, without it being connected into something that's important to them. Meaning that you don't start conversations with pitching because, like in baseball, if someone's pitched at, they've got some options, including ducking and avoiding it. And so we have to ditch the pitch and instead engage in conversations where we get them talking as much as us, if not more. That's what I think ditch the pitch is.
Yeah, I think that, but I think and I agree. I think when you come in, and I think it's sort of a default behavior is, look, I've been loaded up by my marketing department with this, this pitch, right? And I've been trained maybe on my elevator pitch, my 30-second, and gosh, I want to use it, right? I'm burning to use it. And as you said, it's not a great way to start a conversation. But one of the questions I get asked a lot is people say, okay, well, fine, we want to have a conversation, but what am I supposed to do when the customer asks? So what do you do? How am I supposed to respond to that? How do you coach people to respond to that?
You need to have one or two sentences to be able to give context to what you do. So we help companies and people grow their sales. And so that we can determine whether that's something we can help you with, I have some questions for you. So I can give them context and an overview of what I do and then lead it back into them. In fact, this morning, I was preparing for a second conversation with a couple of people in one business. And in getting ready for it, I have all my notes from last time. I had the research I did last time. And we were supposed to today go over how our sales force analysis would be the first step and helpful to them. And so I was spending, 35 minutes this morning putting together, here's the slides I want to show them. And I kept thinking, I got to connect it to them. But I got so excited about how passionate I was that this was the right thing for them that I caught myself thinking, oh my gosh, we're not here yet. They haven't really admitted that they're willing to do this. And I presented this prematurely. So I really did pitch at the end of the last conversation. And that's dangerous too.
Sure.
So then today he brought in his CFO and he had his sales manager and then the company owner. And then I had to set the stage that I know you're expecting a presentation today. And I'm ready to do that when it's the right time. First, let's confirm and clarify what we talked about last time and answer any additional questions I have or you have. And we spent an hour and 5 minutes continuing to learn more about their situation and never even got into the product presentation because it still wasn't time to do that.
Next week is the July 4th holiday week. We're going to start the week with a couple of repeat episodes, our best episodes from our past. Episode 259 with Mark Hunter is going to be on Monday. And on Tuesday, July 4th, episode 331 with my great friend Jill Conrath. Then on Wednesday, sort of a big day, it's episode 500, a big milestone for Accelerate. Be sure you come back and check that out. My guest will be Coca Sexton. So that's it, friends. Another excellent week of Accelerate, the world's best sales podcast. Please take 30 seconds right now, go to iTunes, subscribe, leave a review. I personally want to know what I can do to make this an even more valuable resource for you. For our regular listeners, I'll see you bright and early Monday morning. For everyone else, we'll see you again back here next week. Until then, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.